Okay. Hello and welcome to Eye Openers. Thank you guys so much for joining us wherever you are hearing this podcast. It's so great to have you with us because the truth is if you guys weren't here, I would just be talking to myself or with Brian, which would also be a great conversation. But it's so nice to have friends and know that we are sharing eye-opening moments with you to better your life, better your leadership, better your business. But on this show, we start off with one of the most eye-opening insights that's super consistent, which is caffeine
Oh,
and my deep love for coffee, which has fueled many great ideas and has fueled lots of action in my business. But that's just me. I love a good pour over coffee. I'm pretty basic as far as that goes, though I do like, my great high quality coffee, but I'm not into like the espresso and all of that. It's too much time for me. I don't
there
take
you
the time.
go.
What about you, Brian? What's your caffeine beverage of choice?
So normally at home, we're going to go for a French press every morning. So that's my job is to make the French press first thing because if my wife wakes up and there's no coffee, it's just a bad morning. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I love
So
your wife.
that's what we usually do. Now, however, this afternoon I went for the Nespresso just because it's quick and easy. So we've got that for backup purposes.
Yes,
But I
yes.
always do it in the ember because it keeps it nice and toasty, and I don't drink it too fast. So it's good. It's good to get a little afternoon caffeine now and again. I'm usually just a
Yeah.
1 cup kind of guy, but yeah.
Yeah, I have a struggle with that internally because I love the coffee. I think because I lived in cold climates for so long, I love the act of like drinking a warm drink. But I definitely am impacted by having too much caffeine. So I try to stop at noon. This is a rare exception right now. I'm having the last bit of my coffee for the show today, but I love that amber. So is that keeps the coffee warm? Does it sit on
Mhm.
a tray or?
It can, well, it charges on a tray, but I usually just, I don't usually keep it on there. I just put it on, I wash it afterwards, put it back on there. It's ready to go the next day.
Cool. Okay, so the
135
cup itself
degrees.
keeps
The
it warm.
Yes, the mug by itself, it has a battery in there, and it's got a little light on there that you can kind of see, and it's like once it's at your ideal temperature, then it's like you're good.
I love it. Okay, Amber, if you're listening to this, you guys can send me one.
Yeah, there you go.
Now
Yes.
accepting sponsors for the show.
They might get wind of it. Yeah.
Okay, and what goes in your coffee? This is a big deal. So I vacillate between like some good old half and half to almond milk to lately I've been doing a lot of bulletproof coffee. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but
Heard of it. I don't know that I've had it.
the theory is that the MCT oil really helps with mental focus in the morning. So jury's out on if it's the coffee itself doing the job or if it's the extra adaptogens that are helping out. But I
That's
do love
funny.
it.
Okay, good. Yeah, so for me, I do a little liquid stevia
Mm,
and half. That's what I do in mine. Um,
beautiful.
so try to keep it real basic. Keep the flavor. I like it strong, just a little half and then a little sweetener. Uh,
Yeah.
Easy.
Well, I'm big on routines too. So I hear you. Just same
Yes,
thing day after day is super helpful.
absolutely.
Well, now that we are adequately caffeinated and aligned on our coffee drinks here of choice, I think it's only fair to give people a proper introduction to you because there is a lot of good reasons why we have you on the show today. And you guys, this is another example of why being well networked is so important. So Brian and I met through a mutual connection. I think we're both on the same like show that individual was hosting, right?
Mhm.
And he even encourages like connect with other people on this who are also tuning in and leverage that. And it's so, so helpful to know other people who maybe are doing exactly what you do, or maybe a variation of it, which I think, Brian, we're adjacent to each other. We do something similar, but a little bit different. And that is so helpful. I can't tell you how many referrals I get that I'm like, oh, I'm not the right person for you. Like, you're either like a little too early in your business or whatever. You need someone more strategy focused versus culture focused. And I'm so excited to send those people to my friends that I know, like, and trust. And that only happens through us having had several calls together already. We're like in this mastermind together that you started. And it's just a great, great way to not only drive activity in your business, but support others. And I find that good karma pays me dividends. But here's a little bit about Brian that everybody should know. You have been part of managed services industries since the early 2000s. You have both your bachelor's and MBA from Baylor University. And for over 20 years, you've worked in multiple MSPs and have bought and sold multiple MSPs. So guys, we're going to dive into that a little bit because I am totally into entrepreneurship by acquisition. So we will definitely be chatting about that. And then you have been everything from a technician in those organizations to ops managers to CFO and CEO. You have grown multiple MSPs to over $5 million in revenue and managed in excess of $15 million in revenue. And you have this thorough understanding that makes you a really great partner and coach for these organizations. Your expertise and leadership and coaching can help other MSP owners or CEOs achieve those results as well in their business and life. You are passionate about finding the right clients for your coaching practice. I totally see you on that. To help take their business and leadership to the next level. So, Brian, officially welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That was a great intro. I really appreciate it. It's like hearing that about yourself. It's like, okay, yeah, I guess all those things are true.
Well, it's kind of important. The audience needs to understand, like, oh, this is why I should listen. This guy is totally an operator. And I think that's something I really focus on in who I bring onto the show, is not just talking heads and not just consultants who don't have any idea what it means to actually be the operator. I share a lot that I help operate my husband's business. I have team members of my own. Like, if you haven't sat in that seat, I come from doing operations before. Like, if you haven't sat in that seat, it is really difficult to understand what your clients are facing. And while it's certainly not a prerequisite, I know plenty of coaches who have different backgrounds who are plenty helpful. But I think especially in managed services and MSPs, I think that it is really essential to help drive that business.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful because it's like, hey, I've sat where you're sitting now, and came out the other side, it's still alive, and and so might have a thing or two that could be helpful in somebody's journey. So
right. Or I say the same thing about coaching. Like, I know what it feels like to be sitting with this coaching proposal because I hire my own coach. Like, I know what it's like to pay an edgy amount for coaching, but that actually really helps you drive change. So that's how I use that in my business. But let's talk about how you got started in MSPs. What did the start of your career kind of look like, and how did it transition to entrepreneurship?
wow, yeah. So I started out knowing that I wanted to work in technology. And so I'm one of the few people that I know that actually like majored in IT and business that actually ended up, running an MSP. Like, most people I talk to are like, yeah, I did, engineering or religion or I have a history degree or something like that. And then it's like, yeah, and here I am, doing cybersecurity. But yeah, so I started off just doing tech work, like networking and servers and all of that kind of stuff, and did programming for a good while and all that, and then just kind of grew with the company. I was the second person in the company, and just as we grew, I grew as a leader into more and more, like director of ops roles, and and then executive at that point. And then and this was all like working for somebody else. And then I, at some point when I was like, okay, I feel like I kind of cracked the code of what it takes to grow this an MSP and IT business. Then I kind of I went out on my own, and I actually bought a small company, and then kind of grew it from there. I knew that I didn't want to start from scratch, so I did the like you mentioned, kind of entrepreneurship through acquisition, because I'd already been involved in several transactions before that. And so yeah, so that's kind of how I got into owning my own business in the IT space.
Can I ask, what was the size of the company from a people and revenue standpoint when you purchased it?
Yeah, it was just like 5 people. I mean, under 1 million in revenue. And so very small at the time, small local company. And yeah, so kind of I was like I knew I didn't want to start from zero. But I didn't also want to, buy something huge at the time. And so we kind of, I kind of settled in a pretty small spot, and was able to really kind of shape it how I wanted it to be shaped, because
Mhm.
whenever you buy a company, it's never just right. Like, there's always a lot of stuff to fix. And so we were able to do that pretty well. And and actually acquire further from there, acquire other companies after that as well, and
Wow.
integrate them into the operations. So, yeah.
Was that what you set out to do? Like, did you think that you were just going to do like M&A along the way to build a bigger MSP, or what was your thinking?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I absolutely did. I knew that I wanted to grow it faster than I was going to be able to just organically.
Mhm.
And so yeah, so I set out as with that as kind of like one of the strategies for growth, right? I mean, you do have to grow organically, and and acquire clients.
Mhm.
But yeah, but I did know, I was like, as far as value creation, when you think about enterprise value and that kind of a thing, it was definitely always part of the plan, to do M&A activity. And it's one of my favorite parts of it was one of my favorite parts of running the business, to be quite honest. Like, I was like, yeah, let somebody else run the operations. I'll do M&A because it's like super fun for me. So yeah.
I love that. Okay. Wow, we're aligned in more ways than we even knew. I'm so excited by M&A and what that means for organizations. But in order for those numbers to work and to make a sale worthwhile or purchasing worthwhile, you're probably already thinking about what kind of value you're going to bring to the organization to improve upon what exists. And like you said, like when you buy something, it's never quite perfect. Can you tell me, what was your thesis about how you could make improvements, or what do you look for in a place where you know you can add value to that organization and then see the growth?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, golly, there's so many things when evaluating an acquisition. You got to, obviously, the dollars and cents are a huge thing. So it's got to be the right price. But what happens is, generally speaking, when you acquire something, then it's in integrated into something that already exists. You get uh well, basically the multiples, it's based on multiple of EBITDA. So your
Mhm.
multiple is going to go up, the more EBITDA dollars you have, in the company. So just by default, if you're a $5 million business and you're acquiring a $2 million business, presumably that $2 million business is going to have a lower multiple EBITDA than yours does. And then when you put them together, they're going to be even more. So there's that piece of kind of the, it's like magic numbers. I don't know, like it works though. I mean, it's, anecdotally, as well as the data, at least in the managed services space. But then, I mean, you're looking for things like, what holes could you fill in your team? And does the team that you're acquiring, have those kind of people that you need? You're looking at culture. You really want to make sure there's a strong culture fit, between the organizations, because it's one of the hardest things to change a lot of times. Right? When you spent a lot of time building your own culture, and and you have a strong culture, a very strong team, integrating a new team into that, and really like giving the vision and making sure that that everybody's on board with the culture is absolutely huge. Which I know we can probably talk culture for hours.
Well,
But
let's
yeah,
do some of that actually, if you don't mind.
okay.
What do you when you're assessing for culture fit for an acquisition in a merger, um, what are you noticing? Like how do you assess for whether it's a good fit or not? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's super hard, because usually for the the vast majority of the what I'll call the dating period, with with the company you're acquiring, you're only talking with the owner. And so that's kind of the only view you get of what's going on in the organization. And so usually it's later in the process, when you actually start to get to talk to some of the team. And usually even then it's only some of the executive team that you're able to talk to, because they don't want the word getting out before the deal is done. And so so in some ways you kind of have to go based on just what you can figure out from those conversations. And then hopefully they have some good, I don't know, documentation, if you will, around around what the culture looks like. We use the thing called a culture guide that was like really detailed, of like, hey, here's not just values, but what do they mean and how do you act them out in everyday life inside the company. And so if somebody has something like that, super helpful. But yeah, I mean, it's really just through conversation and getting to know the people, because yeah, the culture is made up of the people. So
That's right. Was there ever a situation where you had gone through with a deal and then later found out pieces of information that create challenges for you, either in with personnel, leadership, or culture?
yes, very much. And not only yeah, once again, like in the case that I'm thinking of, it was kind of like it was later on, and I wasn't as involved in the the pre transaction, but finding out, oh, okay, these people work very differently than our people. They, maybe we're remote and they're all in person. And how do you kind of start to blend those cultures together, or they just, or whatever, the way they deliver service is very different, or things like that. And so yeah, definitely, there's yeah, it's just hard. And then you've got to do a lot of work to like team build, and get everybody on the same page, and find a new way of operating together, and all of those kind of things. So yeah, there's definitely been the fair share of challenges.
Mhm, mhm. So it's a beautiful story or case study when it goes well, and we can talk about how successfully we made this transition and like measuring before and after with all sorts of metrics that are fun. But what happens when it doesn't go well? So you're trying to integrate, you're trying to performance manage, or talk about the values, talk about how we live them, kind of create that alignment. When that doesn't work, what are some of the tough decisions you have to make and why are they important?
Hmm. Yeah, it's so hard. So what I'll say is that on the culture piece. So when you're looking at people, there's different ways to evaluate the fit, right? I use something called 3 C's, which is culture, competence, and commitment.
Mhm.
So, but so culture being, obviously, is there a culture fit? Are they on board with the values, all that? Competence, how well do they do their job? And then commitment, are they committed to the team? Are they committed to the company? Culture, the culture piece of that is, it's the hardest thing to coach, right? It's the hardest thing to, like, if somebody's just not a culture fit, it's really difficult for that to change. And so yeah, you have to start making hard decisions on, hey, is this person the right person to be in the organization, based on that, and and have a plan for, ideally you want to be able to coach them into that, but at some point, yeah, you're going to have people who are just not a fit. And then vice versa, you're going to have, like, and I've had this happen many times, where it's like, they start, like, you acquire a company, you start to integrate the teams, and then they self-select out, because they know, like, hey, I'm not going to get along well in this organization. And so it's and I've had some tough losses of that. Like, hey, this person was really great at their job. They did an amazing work and had a high level of skill and all of that stuff. But ultimately it was like, yeah, I'm not gonna be happy here. So I'm gonna choose to go somewhere else, and that's okay.
Yeah, right. I think that people are so afraid of that happening if they purchase a company or whatever. And I think that honestly, it can be such a gift, because the hardest thing is keeping someone who's uncertain or ambivalent, like, and not really knowing like what's going to happen. That is the hardest thing to deal with. And when someone's decided, like you said, self-selected, like, oh, this isn't going to be right for me, I'm going to go, like, it ultimately saves you a lot of time and energy
It
down the
does.
road. I wonder, it might be painful in the moment,
Mhm.
but you will certainly survive and overcome it,
Yes.
kind of because there's no other option.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And those are some of the hardest conversations to have too.
Mhm.
But I once heard somebody say it's like everything that you want in life is on the other side of a hard conversation.
I love that.
So it's like, all right, you gotta learn to have those. So
Yeah. Give me a little insight into when this has gone incredibly well. So was there an instance where you guys were looking to grow? Maybe that was like an acquisition, and it was like, wow, you were able to actually learn about all through this other organization, and maybe systems or processes or the way they trained that was actually so helpful, and you learned from them.
yeah, yeah. I think what comes to mind is an acquisition that I did um, in 2018, and we actually acquired a company that was larger um, than we were at the time, and it was a good strategic fit because we were serving credit unions. This company served banks. It worked very, very well. From that perspective, there definitely were challenges along the way, but I think what we ended up with there is that it was a great synergy because they gave us a lot of knowledge that we didn't have at the time,
Mhm.
around, okay, what do banks need, and everything that a bank needs, a credit union needs. As far as IT goes, it's just not as strongly enforced with credit unions generally, or at least with small credit unions. So yeah, we gained some really good experience, a lot of knowledge, and I think and in that circumstance, like the cultures fit very, very well together. We ended up only losing one person in that transition. And it was kind of like it was the right person to lose. In retrospect, it was like, okay, and we're
That
able to
makes sense.
fill that gap and everything, and it was fantastic. So yeah, that would be an example of it going really well.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I don't mean to
Yeah.
be just doom and gloom, but I feel like so often it's easy to get materials from people who are want to talk about the highlight reel and all the
Oh
things that
yeah.
go well. And that is why we make a
Yeah.
point of sharing, what it looks like when it's messy, so that everyone can understand how normal this is, and that this is
Mhm.
just one season of your business right now. And if you put in the work, right, that hopefully you can get to the other side. But the highlight reel is nice too. So thanks for sharing.
It's fun.
Tell us about this current chapter that you are now in, where you have, I believe, sold all the MSPs and are now sitting in the coaching chair. Tell me about that decision.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not 100% out of MSPs, but I'm not no longer operating one. So I do,
Got it.
but long story short, yeah, I mean, I after I sold up my company, I worked for the buyer for a while, little over a year, and then decided to kind of go off my own and pursue this dream that I had for a long time. I mean, I it was probably over 10 years that I was like, I really want to serve others in the same way that I was served by my coach, because it was such a life changing experience for me when I first got a coach. And so yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm working with about 20 MSP owners on a one-on-one coaching on a monthly basis, and just really in really, really enjoying the the relational aspect of it, as well as just like the progress that I get to see these individuals make in their business. It's like just like when you just see a night and day difference, kind of before and after, and super rewarding. And I'm just, yeah, super passionate about it. So I don't know if that answers your exact question or not.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
awesome. I mean, you benefited so much from having your own coach. I don't know if you guys caught that message. I promise I didn't pay him to say that. But duh, coaching is super helpful. Like I've had one for years, you've had one for years, and
Yeah.
it's also, I find it's like really rewarding. So I hear what you're
Yes.
saying. Like you
Yeah.
wanted to move into that seat and have that experience
Mhm.
too. Plus, think about how much value you have to bring. I mean, that's really incredible that obviously your niche is super intentional, and it seems to be really serving them. I'm curious, like what are the top one or two pain points that that come up in those coaching conversations with your clients?
Well, to start, I think one of the biggest things is that they don't know where they're going.
Mm,
So usually it's kind of like, because I'll ask like, hey, where do you want to be in 3 years from now? And it's like, well, I want to grow, or I want to add some employees or whatever. And I'm like, well, let's get really clear about that first,
mm,
because and we start with tenure, when we're actually working together, but knowing, being with the end in mind, right? It's one of the 7 habits. So if you don't know where you're going, uh, you'll get there.
yeah.
Which is, or yeah, or right, like you'll be somewhere, but it won't be on purpose. And so really helping them be on purpose. And then another, I think another significant thing is just kind of, I'm going to say highest and best use for a CEO. And what are you spending your time on?
Mm,
And is that the highest and best use for the company? And how good of a match is that for what you're actually passionate about and best in the world at? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, call it highest and best use, or zone of genius, that kind of a thing. But like, how can we get you operating in what's going to really, move the needle most for the business and what you're most passionate about? And if you can get there as a CEO, as an executive, your effectiveness is going to go through the roof, and your business is going to grow. Like those are natural byproducts of that happening. So I think those are probably two things that come to mind when you say
I love that. So helping people identify, or helping them kind of think through where do they want the business to go. So starting with the end in mind, right? And then
that. Mhm.
you're structuring probably goals and
Yeah.
yeah, around that. And then helping them better understand what's their zone of genius, and being more thoughtful about the tasks they decide to take on, ensuring that they are always thinking about the highest and best use of their time.
That's
Awesome.
great summary.
I love it. I know. It wasn't even AI. It was real human. Um, well, I find that so helpful to understand, what other people are thinking about, what you've been through yourself, and just, hearing about the culture and leadership challenges, which, obviously I always have a soft spot for, but that you always married it with this really great kind of business direction, I guess, as well. And that I think people feel like these things are so separate. And this is
Mm,
such a great example of actually they work really well together. If you have an idea of the direction you're trying to head, you can shape culture around creating that. And then vice versa. If you're really, really clear on the values that you want to espouse as a company, then you can train people around that, or you can select people around. There's a lot of things you can do. You can select your service offerings around that, right? And the more we can align what the business is actually doing with who we want the business to be, then you're finding the business's zone of genius, so to speak. And we say no to the other things that don't fit that. And when we can stay focused and intentional in that way, then that's when you get that really amazing product market fit. That's when you get that really engaged workforce that loves what they do and wants to go above and beyond. And then, an owner that's really focused on creating that outcome that they've spoke about.
I love that. I love that, and especially which is a lot of the work that you do is just like being really on purpose about it, right? Because a lot of companies just grow and you have a culture, whether or not you've designed it on purpose is another thing, right? So either it just happens or you design what you want it to be and make it into something that you really want. And so yeah, talk about that a lot with my clients as well.
Right,
I
right.
love that.
But it sounds like that intentionality also is what helped a lot of your um, deals be successful. Is that you approach that with that intentionality too to make it more smooth.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you, but I have had so many eye-opening moments in this show, just really getting clarity around, like we just spoke about, just that direction and intentionality that can really just change the experience you have and the outcomes that you create for your business, for your life, for your leadership, for your culture, all of the above. Thank you guys so much for joining us, whether you're seeing this live or you're listening to it post-production a little more cleaned up. We really appreciate you being here. And I want to hear what your eye-opening moments were from this show. So whether you're seeing this on whether you're seeing it in LinkedIn, YouTube, or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, there is definitely a way to give us your feedback in the show notes. So look for the link there. And I always like to know what resonates with you guys so we can get more of it. Until the next time, thank you so much for joining us today on Eye Openers.